This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
So today we're joined by Mary Lannin, and Mary, as you may know, is an ANS Fellow, and she sat on our Board of Trustees since 2017, in addition to being a former member of the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee, where she served as chairperson from 2015 to 2018, and again in 2021. Mary has also spoken extensively on the subject of women in numismatics. Today she'll be presenting on Women in the Sea, Admirals, Pirates, and Spies. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, before I get started, there's sort of like a little underlying philosophy issue that I want to get out of the way. So what is the other? Well, it's something that's not you. It's a word that floats around maybe above the description that you should be using, which is a prejudice. It could be something you don't understand. And if the other is incorrectly shaded in historical context, it can make something more scary, less scary, or perhaps vindicates your side of things. It is neutral, but not neutral. It can be seen to be exclusive as a way to preserve gendered roles, a country, religion, ideological roles, any of those things. Historians, especially ancient historians, were men, and they wove the other through their histories. So you had to be a remarkable individual, male or female, to be even mentioned at all. And we need to pare away the instances of the other to try and see a more accurate picture. So, is this going to work? There we go. Let's take to the seas. All right. It's no surprise that over half the population of history is written by men, and notable women throughout the ages have not had their stories told. If we could imagine ourselves, if we could imagine ourselves back in the 5th century BCE in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the city of Halicarnassus in Caria, we may have known of a woman named Artemisia I. She was the daughter of Lacedaemon, who was the first tyrant of Caria under the Achaemenid Empire. She was born during the rule of Darius I. As a vassal of the Persian Empire, Caria was involved in the Persian Wars against Greece, and as we know Artemisia's story through the writings of Herodotus, the almost contemporary historian who was also born in Halicarnassus. Artemisia inherited the throne from her husband, who ruled so briefly we don't even know his name. She was the second of the 4 rulers in this dynasty, and her dynasty only lasted 70 years. Xerxes went to war against Greece in 480 BCE, and as the queen of Caria, Artemisia contributed a naval contingent of 5 ships out of the 70 at the Battle of Salamis. Despite the Persian defeat, she gained Xerxes' admiration for her tactical acumen, particularly her bold decision to ram an ally's ship to evade capture, a maneuver that deceived her Greek pursuers. Xerxes was watching the losing battle from the shore and is reputed to have said, "My men have become women and my women men." So maybe that's a little instance of the other. Artemisia died sometime about 460 BCE, and she ruled twice as long as Alexander the Great. So I've got some coins from Caria from the rule at the time of Artemisia I. And so this coin is a derrick. It would have circulated in her area. Let's see the other side. Incus. And this style is one of my favorites. Okay, so this is a stater of Caunus, and it's got the enigmatic running goddess, and she may represent Iris, who is the goddess of the rainbow, sea, and sky, and who also served as the messenger of the gods. This description on the back of the Betel, or the Aramaic words Beth El, meaning house of the gods, on the reverse is of a conical stone, which may originally have been a meteorite. These stones were worshipped as the embodiment of the gods. As further evidence of the stone being a meteorite, the god Iris is known as the goddess of rainbows. And this is her connection between the sky and the earth, and it probably represents the event when the meteor fell. Okay. All right, back to the PowerPoint. So here's the derrick that I just showed you, and here's the stater from Kaunas that is in our collection. Okay, the second Artemisia lived about 150 years later than the warlike Artemisia I. She was born at a date that's not known to us, and she was the sister wife of Mausolus, who reigned from 377 to 353 BCE. She was the member of the Achaemenid dynasty of Caria, and this is a short dynasty, and there were 7 rulers, but 2 of them were women. It only lasted about 69 years. Artemisia is known for commanding a fleet, and she played a role in the military political affairs of the Aegean after the decline in Athenian naval superiority. She was the sole ruler of Caria after Mausolus' death and ruled for 3 years until her own death in 350 BCE. After her husband's death, the island Republic of Rhodes objected to the fact that a woman was ruling Caria. Rhodes sent a fleet against Artemisia without knowing that her deceased husband had built a secret harbor. Artemisia hid ships' rowers and marines and allowed the Rhodians to enter the main harbor. Artemisia and her citizens met the Rhodians at the city gates and invited them into the city. When the Rhodians began exiting their ships, Artemisia sailed her fleet through an outlet in the sea and into the main harbor. She captured empty Rhodian ships, and the Rhodian men who disembarked to be welcomed into the city were killed in the marketplace. Artemisia then put her men back on the Rhodian ships and had them sail back to Rhodes. The men were welcomed in the Rhodian harbor, and they took over Rhodes. More than 350 years later, in a prime example of the other, Valerius Maximus wrote about Artemisia II drinking her husband's ashes daily in the remaining years of her rule. This witchcraft or ritual contrasted nicely with her faithfulness and purity, and actually spawned a cottage industry during the Renaissance of paintings of Artemisia imbibing. In a criticism of Valerius' 9 books of memorable deeds and sayings, direct and simple statement is avoided, and novelty pursued at any price, producing a clumsy obscurity. This diction is like that of poetry. The uses of words are strained. Metaphors are invented. There are startling contrasts, innuendos, and epithets. Variations are played upon the grammatical and rhetorical figures of speech. So that is what a contemporary thought of his history, which included Artemisia II drinking her husband's ashes. So we do have a nice coin of her husband. Oops. Here is Mausolus, and this would have circulated during her reign. And that is Mausolus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world where he's buried. All right, we're going to sail across the sea, and we're going to go to Ireland. Grace O'Malley was head of the O'Malley clan in the west of Ireland. She was known as the last of the kings of Umail, and it's now known as County Mayo. Grace lived during the 16th century in the rule of the Tudor Queen Elizabeth I, who was always intent on taking over Ireland. The west of Ireland was divided into families or clans who were not always looking out for others, but only for their best interests and protecting their lands through warfare. She took over the active management of the land and cattle inherited from her father. Her 2 marriages brought even more riches, and she owned as much as 1,000 head of cattle and horses, which is a kind of currency. In 1576, O'Malley and Sir Henry Sidney, who was named the Lord Deputy of Ireland, negotiated a surrender and what's called a re-grant of her lands. This was an attempt by England to move from the traditional clan-based governance of Ireland to a type of feudal system that guaranteed the property under English common law. And he said, "There came to me a most famous feminine sea captain called Grace O'Malley, and offered her service unto me, wheresoever I would command her, with 3 galleys and 200 fighting men." However, Sir Richard Bingham, the governor of Connaught, arrested her son and half-brother after claiming they took part in a conspiracy that resulted in the death of English soldiers. Now, I'm condensing what was a really wild and precarious life that Grace O'Malley had. So there are many instances of the Irish people ambushing the English, but we only have an hour, okay? The English kept encroaching on her lands, however, and in 1593, she entreated Queen Elizabeth to, quote, "grant her some reasonable maintenance for the little time she hath left to live." She asked for free liberty during her life to invade with sword and fire all your highness' enemies, wheresoever they are or shall be, without any interruption of any person or persons whatsoever. So she set sail to speak to Queen Elizabeth face to face. Her ships sailed up the River Thames in London, and she met Queen Elizabeth at Greenwich. And as the Irish are like to tell tales, legend has it, on the meeting of the Queen, Grace refused to bow, stating that she herself was queen in her own land and not a subject of the Queen of England. The two, who were roughly about the same age, admired each other, and they reached a truce. Grace would switch from attacking English ships, and she would go after the Spanish ones, and her sons were returned to her. Grace O'Malley died at Rockfleet Castle in 1603, the same year as Queen Elizabeth. And so here we have a couple of coins. That would have circulated. This is a piece, a 3-pence piece from Elizabeth from 1572. And there's an Irish harp there. We have one more. Oops, where did it go? And so this is Henry VIII, and this coin is from 1509 to 1547. Okay. And we go back to share. There we go. Here's the growth that we saw, and the 3-pence from Elizabeth I. Okay, let's sail all the way across the Atlantic, and let's get us into the Caribbean. This is about Calico Jack, Anne Bonny, and Mary Read. As we have seen with Grace O'Malley, female pirates are rare indeed, but during the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean, generally reckoned from like 1690 to 1730. John Rackham, known as Calico Jack, had two female crew members, Mary Read and Anne Bonny. Calico Jack became the captain of the pirate ship Ranger in 1718 by getting the most of the crew to back him instead of Charles Vane, who was the original captain. He was actually in charge. His career consisted of harassing small vessels around Bermuda and the Bahamas. In 1719, he took advantage of a general amnesty for pirates offered by Governor Woodes Rogers. While in Nassau, he met and began an affair with Anne Bonny, even offering to buy her a divorce from her husband James, who just happened to work for Governor Rogers. When that didn't work, Anne fled with Calico Jack. We know a bit more about Mary Read, Rackham's second female crew member, than we do of Anne Bonny. Born in England, she began wearing young men's clothing at her mother's suggestion as a way to inherit money and to boost herself out of her impoverished life. She also joined the British military as a teenager disguised as a young man. Moving to Flanders, she married, and after her husband's early death, decided to try for a new life in the West Indies. Her ship was captured by pirates before arrival, and still dressed as a man, she willingly joined them. She also accepted the king's pardon and began working as a privateer. Joining Rackham, she was among the crew, including Anne Bonny, who stole a sloop named William in Nassau. So much for the king's pardon, right? We don't really know how Bonny and Read concealed their sex, but it might be in wearing breeches, which not only hid their identity, but allowed them to blend in with the rest of the crew. A woman who was captured by the pirates, Dorothy Thomas, left a description of Read and Bonny and said, "They wore men's jackets and long trousers and handkerchiefs tied around their heads, and each of them had a machete and pistol in their hands, and they cursed and swore at the men to murder her." Thomas also was recorded saying that she knew that they were women from the largeness of their breasts. Their luck ran out when Calico Jack and his crew were captured by a pirate hunter, Jonathan Barnett. The Caribbean's finest rum did them in while partying off the coast of Jamaica. Only Read and Bonny and one other crew member were on deck, while Rackham, the rest of the crew, and another crew from an English ship were down below getting drunk. They were captured and brought to a swift trial in Spanish Town, Jamaica, and all were sentenced to be executed. Calico Jack was hanged November 18th, 1720. His career as a pirate lasted 6 days short of 2 years. Both Anne Bonny and Mary Read, quote, pled their bellies and said they were pregnant and were imprisoned. Read died in prison, and there's no record of a death of a child. A burial registry in the parish lists her burial on the 28th of April, 1721, and it reads, Mary Read, pirate. There is no record of Anne Bonny's fate other than a quote from Captain Charles Johnson's 1724 book, A General History of the Pirates. She was continued in prison to the time of her lying in, and afterward reprieved from time to time. But what has become of her since, we cannot tell. Only this we know, that she was not executed. Both Mary and Anne's careers as pirates lasted 2 months. So, where have I put this? Okay. I thought I had a piece of 8, but I don't. Okay, so here is a coin from Charles II. This would have been circulating through the Caribbean at the time Calico Jack and his crew were busy at their jobs, hand-hammered. I read one time that out of all of the silver and gold that came out of the mines in the New World, about 25% of it sank during the hurricanes. I'm sure Rick Bellison knows a lot about this. but it sank during the hurricanes. And so these coins like this are there to be found. All right, we're going all the way from the Caribbean to the South China Sea. Zheng Yi Sao was known as Zheng Li's wife. She was born in 1775, and she married Zheng Li, a notorious pirate, in 1801. She was a member of the Fuzhou Tanka people, or boat people, who were looked down upon by the Han people, who were in turn looked down upon by the ruling Manchu dynasty, the Qing. In 1805, her husband united pirates into the Guangdong Pirate Confederation. Zheng Li had a strict code for pirates. Note the punishment for harming women. When her husband drowned after falling overboard in 1807, she quickly took control. She was familiar with the operations of the fleet because she acted as a negotiator as her husband was bringing the Confederation into existence. After years of raiding the coastal areas and river deltas in their flat-bottomed junks, the local government called in the help of the Portuguese Navy to rid themselves of their predations. In 1809, the pirates were blockaded in Tungchung Bay by the joint Sino-Portuguese fleets, but they managed to outsail their captors and they escaped. China had to use another nation's navy to give them the upper hand, and it didn't work. So, I want to give you an idea of how powerful her pirate confederation was. And so the best way to do that is to compare it, I think, to the British Navy. So here's the British Navy in 1810. They had 152 battleships. They grew all the way total ships to 584 ships. The seamen increased from 36,000 men to 114,000 men. And they grew because of the French Revolution and the various wars between Britain and France. In 1812, the Royal Navy was the world's largest navy. Okay, Zheng Yi Sao's Pirate Confederation. There were 6 divisions. She actually ran the red division, but there was the white flag, the black flag, the blue flag, the yellow flag, and the purple flag. By 1807, there were 800 large ships, and these ships were junks. And junks have flat bottoms, and so it enabled them to actually sail up rivers and harass people living inland. They could carry 800 tons of cargo, and they could hold as many as 40 cannons. At the height of the Pirate Confederation, the Confederation may have numbered over 70,000 men. So, in other words, it's 60% of the world's largest navy in comparison. Okay, taking matters into her own hands, Zheng Yi Sao retired by sailing into Canton Harbor, flags flying, with her crew of 17,318 men aboard 226 junks. She personally, out of this group, commanded 24 ships and over 1,400 men. She dictated the terms of her surrender, which allowed the men to keep their freedom and some of their ships. Many of the former pirates joined the Chinese Navy. In the Western world, Sam Bellamy is known as the most successful pirate ever. He had a crew of 200 men, and in a little bit more than a year, he captured 53 ships, netting in today's dollars 175 million. So, how much do you think Zheng Yi Sao made with 800 ships, almost 70,000 men, from 1801 to 1810? I can't figure that out, but I think that Sam Bellamy better move over. Ever the entrepreneur, Zheng Yi Sao spent the rest of her career laundering money and goods in a smuggling racket that was fronted by a gambling house. She married one of her fellow pirates. They had one son together. And we will go to the coin camera. This is in our collection, and this is from 1736 to 1906. So it would have been something that Zheng Yi Sao may have picked up in her raids. And this is very cool. This is one of my favorite things. We have Chinese gambling tokens, a lot of them. And these are made out of mother of pearl. So this was the second part and last part of Zheng Yi Sao's life. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. Thank you. So here's a close-up of that coin again. Now, Laskarina Bouboulina, born in 1771, died rather dramatically in 1825. So meanwhile, on the other end of the world's waters, the delightfully named Laskarina Bouboulina was helping Greek independence against the machinations of the Ottoman Empire. Bouboulina's statue is the first thing you see on Spetses after getting off the Athens ferry. Far more than life-size, the statue's height reminds onlookers of the outside influence she had, not only during the fight for Greek independence, but throughout her life. She was the twice widowed wife of two sea captains, Demetrius Iannousis and Demetrius Boubulis. Much like Zheng Yi Sao, Bouboulina took over her husband's fortune and ships after he drowned in 1811 in a battle against Algerian pirates. She went on to increase her fortune by buying shares in other Spetziot ships. The Ottomans knew of her wealth and tried vainly to seize it, arguing that her last husband had fought alongside the Russians in the last Russo-Turkish War. She returned to her birthplace, which was Constantinople, in 1816 to successfully argue her case. She was, after all, a widow who owned a shipping business, and that was vital to island trade. In 1818, she joined an underground organization called the Filikietaria, a group that was readying Greece for its independence from the Ottomans. After another trip to Constantinople, she began building a ship that exceeded the limits of what the Ottomans allowed. Through bribing an Ottoman admiral sent to oversee the construction, Bouboulina was successful in building the Agamemnon, which was large enough to hold 18 cannon and became the first warship in modern-day Greece. It was not, as the admiral claimed, a long-range Spetziot trade ship. With the Agamemnon, Bouboulina participated in the blockades of both Nafplion and Monomavasia, which were vital battles in the war for Greek independence. Moving back to Spetses after the civil wars of 1824, she was later killed in a family dispute in 1825. She was 54 years old. Bouboulina's contribution to the birth of modern-day Greece has not gone unnoticed numismatically. Oops, sorry, I forgot to read this. Shortly after her death, Russia gave her the honorary rank of admiral in the Russian Navy. In 2018, she was granted the title of Rear Admiral in the Hellenic Navy. Okay, now we get to Bouboulina in terms of money. So from 1988 to 2002, the 1 drachma coins featured her. In 1978, she was on the reverse of the 50 drachma paper note. And finally, 200 years after her death, the new Greek 2 euro coin will have her portrait. Okay, on to Harriet Tubman. Most people associate Harriet Tubman in connection with the Underground Railroad, which helped many former slaves escape the Confederate forces during the Civil War and begin anew. By the end of the Civil War, it is estimated that as many as 500,000 people self-emancipated to the abolitionist northern states. During the Civil War, she served as a scout, a spy, and a nurse for the Union Army. On June 2nd, 1863, aboard the USS John Adams, Harriet Tubman, under the command of Union Colonel James Montgomery, became the first woman to lead a major military operation in the United States when she and 150 African-American Union soldiers rescued more than 750 slaves in the Combahee Ferry raid during the Civil War. By interfering with the production of rice and other crops on these plundered farms, I think that they burned 7 plantations in this sortie, the raid contributed to the downfall of the Confederate economy. The attack served as an example of how unorthodox methods such as guerrilla warfare and use of intelligence may be vital in achieving military goals. So, I think I need to bring this up. Okay. Can you see that, Ben? This is interesting. Serving in battle entitled Tubman to the Civil War Campaign Medal. Sadly, it took Congress 91 years after the Civil War to appropriate the monies necessary to strike these, and they weren't struck until 1956. Up until then, participating soldiers had to make do with a badge. So this is a little piece of numismatic trivia. The Lincoln portrait was sculpted by Francis Davis Millet, who died in the sinking of the Titanic. Okay, back to PowerPoint. Thank you. So there's our campaign medal. The U.S. Mint struck a commemorative series of coins honoring Tubman in 2024. And in 2022, Jean Stephen Solman, the 1999 Saltus Award winner, sculpted this powerful rendition of Harriet Tubman. Can you see that or not? For this and her other activities, Tubman was posthumously honored as a brigadier general for her service during the Civil War at a ceremony at Veterans Day last year at the Harriet Tubman Underground State Park in Church Street, Maryland. So let me try to get this. Let's see. Raise the arm. Okay. There. So this is Harriet Tubman. We'll get it eventually. Yeah, I think Jean did a really awesome job on this medal. And this is the reverse of that medal. Okay, we also have, maybe not, we have, this is an example of a Confederate States $50 that the ANS has that would have been used around the time of the Combahee Ferry raid. And here's a silver dollar in the United States with absolutely gorgeous toning. Okay, here we go. Grace M. Hopper, known as Amazing Grace. Grace was born in 1906 when U.S. coinage design went from Long Acre's 1906 cent. This is courtesy of Dr. Eric Krauss, who let me use his photographs of this cent, to this incredibly toned silver dollar of Adolph Weinman when she died in 1992. There's quite a bit of history packed into those years, and Grace Hopper was central to many things that we take for granted, such as our ability to use the computer. Essentially, Hopper helped to revolutionize the United States Navy and the way we use computers every day. Grace Hopper graduated from Yale in 1934 with a mathematics PhD, and her service in the U.S. Navy Reserve in World War II put her on the front lines of computer science in the 1940s. In 1943, Hopper became one of the WAVES, which stood for Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. And she had to petition to do that because she didn't weigh enough and she wasn't tall enough. Anyway, she was assigned to the Bureau of Ships Computation Project at Harvard University. There, she joined a team working on the IBM Automatic Sequence Controlled Calculator, better known as the Mark I, the first electromechanical computer in the United States. In 1946, she left active service when the Navy declined her request for a regular commission due to her age. She was 40, but she remained a naval reservist. From 1946 to 1949, she continued to work on the Mark II and the Mark III computers under Navy contracts. And this slide is for Ben. In 1947, she popularized the word bug when a moth flew into the computer monitor, and that's her handwriting. First actual case of a bug. In 1949, Hopper joined the Eckert-Mauchly Computer Corporation in Philadelphia as a senior mathematician. The company, which was soon acquired by Remington Rand and then which turned into Sperry Rand, had built the first electronic computer, which is the ENIAC, under Army contracts. In the early 1950s, Eckert-Mauchly was developing the Universal Automatic Computer, which we call UNIVAC. While working on the UNIVAC 1 and 2, Hopper pioneered the idea of automatic programming and explored new ways to use the computer to code. In 1952, she developed the first compiler called the A-O, which translated mathematical code into machine-readable code, an important step toward creating modern programming languages. In 1953, Hopper proposed the idea of writing programs in words rather than symbols, but she was told her ideas would not work. Nevertheless, she continued working on an English language compiler, and in 1956, her team was running Flowmatic, the first programming language to use word commands. Unlike Fortran or Mathematic, which used mathematical symbols, Flowmatic used regular English words and was designed for data processing purposes. By 1959, she and other colleagues had helped to create and popularize COBOL, one of the first standard computer languages. Hopper's use of creating word-based languages helped to expand the community of computer users. By making computers accessible to people without an engineering or math background, this is especially important at a time when computer companies were marketing their products to the private sector. And by developing programs that used word commands rather than symbols, Hopper believed that more people would feel comfortable using computers, particularly in business applications such as payroll. Throughout her career in the computer industry, Hopper remained a Navy reservist. In 1966, when she was 60, age restrictions forced her to retire from the Navy as a commander. She later called it, quote, "the saddest day of my life." So I'm not certain how long it took the Navy to realize that this was like a really bad idea, but months later she was recalled to active service to help standardize the Navy's multiple computer languages and programs. She retired from UNIVAC, a division of Sperry Rand, in 1971 when she was 65. In accordance with Navy attrition regulations, Hopper retired from the Naval Reserve with the rank of commander at age 60 at the end of 1966. She was recalled to active duty in August 1967 for a 6-month period that turned into an indefinite assignment. She again retired in 1971, but was again asked to return to active duty in 1972. After a career that spanned more than 42 years, Hopper retired from the Navy on August 14, 1986, At the time of her retirement, she was the oldest active duty commissioned officer in the United States Navy. 79 years, 8 months, and 5 days. In 1991, the year before she died, she received the National Medal of Technology. And this is notable because she was the first person to receive this as an individual. Normally, they gave them to corporations or industries of other sorts. 4 years after her death in 1992, the USS Hopper was launched, and it's a guided missile carrier. In 2016, President Obama posthumously awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But the best description I've heard about Hopper was when a colleague described her as appearing to be all Navy, but when you reach inside, you find a pirate dying to be released. And she was such an extraordinary woman, and so I thought I would leave us with a quote from her. Okay. Any questions? I can't see, so.
Yeah, Michael, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Nice talk, Mary. I really enjoyed it.
Hi, Michael.
I wanted to comment about Grace Hopper.
Okay.
Because I'm in the computing kind of business as a scientist. And Grace Hopper is a towering figure.
No kidding.
Computer science. I mean, you know, you highlighted some of her achievements, but they're really, really long. One of the things that our lab, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, does at the National Energy Research Supercomputing Center is name its computers, the big iron, the fastest computers in the world at sometimes, after famous scientists. And Hopper was a beast. And I actually used that one very, very successfully to do quite a number of calculations about hurricanes in a warming world, and probably have written 20 papers or maybe more than that, based on the simulations I was able to do on the Hopper machine. But it goes beyond that. There is a program, and I don't remember the exact name, but it's named after Grace Hopper, to bring young women into the computing sciences.
Like the STEM program?
It's a STEM kind of thing, but it's focused on young ladies for computing sciences in particular.
Good.
And I think it's an annual program that high schoolers, I think, can apply to, and it's very, very popular, as you might imagine.
Yeah, it was sort of extraordinary trying to write about these 8 women. It's harder to find information on the ancient women, but by the time I got to Grace Hopper, I mean, I could have done 45 minutes on Grace, as Michael would probably agree with. She did so many things. She had, I think, 2 PhDs, mathematics and maybe physics. And after the war, she wasn't allowed to teach at Yale or Harvard because they didn't have women professors. But the US Navy quite obviously couldn't live without her. So I just, who is it? Somebody brought up this STEM program? I don't know, I just saw it.
That could be it. That's the Wikipedia page on her. If anyone does know young women who are interested in high performance computing, well, this is probably the link, but have them contact me, and I can put them in touch with some of the organizers of that.
That's great. Thanks for the offer. Okay, anybody have any other questions? Oh, there's a picture of Michael when he's delivering something to Congress, probably, huh? Any other questions?
Yeah, I was curious, Mary. Was Zheng Yi Sao, after she had retired from piracy, she was doing all this smuggling, did she have many run-ins with the authorities, or it was just kind of known that she was engaged in these activities and they let her be?
You know, I think they were probably so grateful she wasn't on the water anymore, they left her alone. That's just a guess. She married a fellow pirate who actually was the adopted son of her first husband. They had a child together. She had 3 children with her first husband. But they moved inland in China, and I think she probably missed all the excitement. So she moved back to Canton, as we would say, and as she would say back then, and ran a gambling house. I mean, she was obviously, the excitement of that kind of life really appealed to her. She was 69 when she died.
Do you know, with the gambling tokens that you showed us, was mother of pearl a pretty common material for
Oh,
those?
yeah, yeah, yeah. All over the South China Sea.
Yeah, they're just
So,
gorgeous.
yep. Any other questions? Well, all right. Thank you, and happy National Women's Month, which I think starts tomorrow. International Women's Month. Thank you all.